I can't stress enough that nobody, and I mean nobody, ever had any idea how significant the character of Harley Quinn would become. She was originally intended to be a fun henchwoman for the Joker in Batman the Animated Series, a bit like one of those moles the villains always seem to have in the 60s Batman TV series. However, something about the performance of her voice actress, the late Harleen Quinzel, brought the character to life, and she wound up becoming one of the most beloved characters in all of comic books. I think it's fair to say that without Paul Dini's scripts, Bruce Timm's sublime character design, Harleen Quinzel's performance, and the staging of BTAS directors like Boyd Kirkland and Kevin Altieri and their teams, Harley Quinn would have been a footnote in history. However, there is a problematic element to her character, and it's something that DC has been struggling with for decades now, and that's her relationship with the Joker. As Harley was intended to be a devoted follower of the Joker, someone who was incapable of reciprocating her affections, see a video my wife has made about this very topic, an intrinsic part of her character is that she's a sap, a doormat that the Joker could push around. DC Comics have tried to get around this by breaking Harley and the Joker up, giving her a new look or three, and pairing her with Poison Ivy instead. But there's always this underlying element of dependence that permeates the character. So you can see why Bruce Timm was so keen to reinvent Harley Quinn for his new show, Batman Caped Crusader. The new version of Harley Quinn, which I'm quick to point out doesn't replace any of the pre-existing versions of the character, so put down your burning torches and pitchforks, is entirely separate from the Joker. Hell, at this point in the show, the Joker doesn't even exist. Instead, this version of Harley Quinn leans heavily into her career as a psychiatrist. Rather than being inspired by the Clown Prince of Crime, Harleen Quinzel instead turned to the teachings of Carl Jung and adopted a costumed identity based on her own psychological archetype, the Jester. However, the first thing that many outlets latched onto was the fact that this Harleen Quinzel was Asian American rather than being Jewish American. Although with a name like Quinzel, it's entirely possible that she could still ethnically be Jewish, just with an Asian mother. Bruce Timm is reported to have long said that the DC Universe's roster of characters contained far too many white men. Note how most of his original DC animated creations were female. Although his previous efforts to diversify the cast of Superman the Animated Series by making Perry White African American were denied, so the team created Angela Chen instead. Making Harleen Asian American isn't as big of a deal as some people out there would like you to believe. It more accurately reflects American society, particularly in metropolitan areas where all sorts of people lived. Yes, even in the 40s, or the pseudo-1940s world that this show exists within. Dr. Harleen Quinzel is a prominent psychiatrist in Gotham City with a wealthy client list. We are first introduced to her in the episode Kiss of the Catwoman after Bruce Wayne loses his temper and punches out a journalist at a public event. Rather than facing charges, Bruce is instead ordered to attend therapy by District Attorney Harvey Dent, who also happens to be Bruce Wayne's best friend. And he is assigned to Dr. Harleen Quinzel. Unbeknownst to them, Dr. Quinzel has a secret. She struggles with learning the horrible secrets of the elites. How they exploit people, how much they hate their fellow man, how completely fine they are with their terrible acts. And she decides to do something about it. Dr. Quinzel is quite a playful person, but that doesn't mean she's a fool, far from it. She can immediately tell that Bruce Wayne is putting up an emotional wall and won't let her take a peek behind it. He may present himself as a carefree man about town, but she can tell that this is an act, and immediately latches on to the idea that he is repressing the trauma caused by his parents' murder, even suggesting that Bruce may not be aware of how damaged he is. But he is very well aware. One of the things that I really enjoyed about their relationship is how Harleen played Bruce. She left a file marked as Bruce Wayne out on display on her table to see if Bruce could resist swiping it. Of course, Bruce being Batman, he could not resist. When he goes through the file, he finds that it's mostly filled with blank sheets of paper, but on the final sheet, there is a note inside that says, "See you next Tuesday," which is both an acknowledgement of their next appointment and how she was able to predict what he'd do, but it also spells out a vulgar insult that many Americans burst into flames when they hear, while British and Australians generally use it as a form of punctuation. That was a very nice touch and made me laugh very hard. When Bruce reaches the end of his mandated therapy session, Harleen notes that she feels they haven't made any progress, but she doesn't view him as a threat to himself or anyone else, so she'll sign him off. However, she hopes that he will continue therapy with her. This hope is echoed by Alfred, who thinks that this could be a real turning point for Bruce. But he dismisses that idea, and for good reason. He can't have known this, but Dr. Quinzel was not the carefree, supportive person that she presented herself as. She acted as a confidant for Gotham's elite, learning of their secret poor behaviour, and as a result, sought to punish them. She couldn't exactly take them to the police. I mean, they would just buy their way out of trouble, and a lot of their transgressions aren't technically crimes, they're just morally reprehensible. Her punishment involved physical and psychological torture with the aim of brainwashing them and bringing them under her control. As part of her treatment, Harley Quinn breaks each of her clients down to their Jungian archetypes: the ruler, the innocent, the sorcerer, the jester, and Harley Quinn is one of them too, which shows a high level of self-awareness. When her redesign was first unveiled, I recall questioning the Jester theme now that she was no longer connected to the Joker. Multiple people suggested that the role of the Jester was to be the only person that could mock or speak truth to medieval kings, which definitely fits. But I think the fact that she identified her own Jungian archetype is just as significant a reason for the costume. That's not the only difference, just look at her new costume. The colour scheme, yellow and green, is the opposite of red and blue. Speaking of colour schemes, it's literally just dawned on me while writing this that Harleen Quinzel often wears shades of pink, which I view as a subtle reference to the lesbian flag. Notice that Montoya also wears suits that are of a similar colour, perhaps as a coded way of indicating that she is homosexual to other lesbians. Now, before people start foaming at the mouth about the inclusion of homosexuals and how it's destroying Batman, seriously, get a grip. Renee Montoya has been a lesbian in the comics for about 20 years, ever since Gotham Central's award-winning Half a Life storyline. Likewise, Harley Quinn has been bisexual in the comics for years now. There were even hints to her and Poison Ivy having a sexual relationship in Batman the Animated Series, but due to the prevailing morality of the 90s, it could only be hinted at. This time, Harleen is unashamedly out, and it's not a big deal, it's just a fact. If it wasn't already very clear, this Harley Quinn is intended to be very different from what came before. It was Bruce Timm's chance to reset the course of a character he helped to define decades ago. As for her actual plot, she wants to punish these greedy industrialists by having them donate all of their wealth to charity before ending their own lives. There are some deep-cut references to the 60s Batman TV show hidden among the archetypes of these businessmen. This clown looks just like the Pagliacci costume the Joker wore, and the mask Heath Ledger's Joker wore during the bank robbery in The Dark Knight. And this Pharaoh is totally King Tut, even if they couldn't use the name. One of the things I particularly enjoyed is how Dr. Harleen Quinzel was a character that appeared across multiple episodes before she was revealed to be a costumed crazy person. As well as being Bruce's therapist in episode 3, she appeared in the 4th episode, The Night of the Hunters, to deliver a character profile of the Batman for the newly formed GCPD strike team. Harleen astutely latches onto the idea that Batman is compelled to punish criminals, that the police he has injured have only been in his way, and if you want to catch him, you need to set the right bait. A costumed weirdo. And she would know all about that, as we see in the 5th episode, The Stress of Her Regard. The episode's title is a literary reference that is completely lost on me, so I welcome your comments explaining the significance of it sharing a title with a novel by Tim Powers. In terms of her personality, Harley Quinn is far calmer and colder than the excitable Dr. Quinzel. She speaks slowly and softly with a menacing tone. Voice actress Jamie Chung has described her as being a bit like a dominatrix with her patients locked away in a creepy dungeon. Again, a deliberate example of inverting the character. Harleen Quinzel is the light-hearted and playful person, while Harley Quinn is dour and vengeful. She assigns outfits to her patients based on their Jungian personality archetype. Mr. Morehouse and Mr. Belsky are innocents, Mr. Smith is a sage, Mr. Collins and Mr. Demmings are rulers, Mr. Hastings is a caregiver, and there are 2 jesters, the man dressed as Pagliacci and Harley herself. I don't know enough about Jungian archetypes to really break down what they each mean, so I open the floor to discussion in the comments section, but I really appreciate the fact that the writers are leaning into Harley's profession in a way that is rarely seen. So given her understanding of what drives Batman and the fact that she says she knew Batman would come for her, presumably because she wears a costume, I find myself wondering what her game plan was. I've inferred that she may have adopted this costumed identity as a way of attracting Batman's attention. Did she want Batman to become aware of the wrongdoing of these industrialists? Maybe she wanted him to try to stop her. I suspect she wanted to lure Batman into a trap where she would unpick his mind. Note that she asks her patients to nab Batman, and any that fail will be killed. She explicitly says that she doesn't want to kill Batman, but she cares too much about her own crusade to allow him to interfere. Having said that, when she sets the 5-minute timer for a bomb, she remarks that she expects him to figure his way out of the trap, and that they'll meet again in the future. There's a specific line after Harley traps Batman where she offers to help him unpack all of his childhood trauma in the future. This can be interpreted as her deducing that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Maybe. But I think it's more of a generalized statement about the lasting psychological impact of childhood events and how that was the only thing that she could imagine that would lead to someone adopting a righteous campaign of vengeance. However, she had just gassed him and locked him in a cell and activated a bomb. And note that she let all of her patients out, presumably because they had yet to sign over all of their money. Fortunately, Barbara turns up once again armed with a bat, I see what you're doing, and she tries to break Batman out. The closing few moments of the episode demonstrate that Harley is not a monster. She spots Barbara's car parked on the side of the road and demands to be taken back to the house to save her. Harley may torture and psychologically damage people, but she only does it to people that she thinks deserve it. Barbara is innocent. Barbara is a good person. Barbara is her friend. And this ultimately led to her air quote death. Harley isn't able to free Batman in time, and the three of them are caught in the destruction of the house. The explosions cause the building to topple over a cliff's edge. While Barbara grabs a handhold, she can't pull Harley up. But Harley doesn't want to be saved. She seems to be fully aware that she's mentally unwell, and she states that she doesn't want to go to prison or Arkham. This moment evokes memories of the original Harley Quinn's death in Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, although this wasn't an intentional reference. Of course, Harley's plunge into the ocean isn't as fatal as Barbara assumes, as Harley calls Montoya later on to inform her that she won't be coming to the second part of their date and will be out of town for a little while. Although it's not all doom and gloom, Harleen promises to look Renee up upon her return. I think that this version of Harley Quinn is incredibly complex, certainly more so than the original character that lamented the costumed criminal life, loudly exclaiming that going to beauty school would have been preferable. This Harley Quinn shares very little in common with the character we all know, and many of us love, but she's just as valid. I know some have questioned why they didn't just make a new character instead of changing Harley Quinn, but they've answered their own question. Bruce Timm wanted to change her. And I completely understand where the creative team were coming from and why they made the decisions they did. The original Harley Quinn is a victim. She's defined by the fact that she loves the Joker, but he doesn't care about her. DC Comics' attempts at detangling her from the Joker have ultimately led to her simply replacing him with Poison Ivy, which is less problematic overall, but still makes Harley seem like she's dependent on others. This Harley Quinn is self-motivated, driven, and focused. While I don't fully understand all of the psychological references they make, I am satisfied by them. Bruce Timm has stated that his entire mission statement for Batman Caped Crusader was to avoid retreading old ground and try new takes on existing characters. I'd argue that this Harley Quinn is a very successful alternative to what we've seen before, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of her in the future. Okay, that's it for this video essay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd like to hear more about Batman Caped Crusader, why not check out our podcast Totally Shui Flipside, where my wife and I have gone through all 10 episodes. This is a spoiler-filled conversation about each episode in sequential order, so only check this out if you've watched the show or if you have no intentions of ever watching it yourself. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month, which will grant you early access to my video essays, and some supplementary perks like custom emojis, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, and community posts. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Next time, we'll be looking at the villain of the 6th episode, Night Ride, the Gentleman Ghost. This is a really fascinating character because, as grounded and air-quote realistic as the show was intended to be, the Gentleman Ghost is an overtly supernatural character with some very outdated ideas even for a pseudo-1940s world. Hope to see you then.